Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into something darker and smellier than your ex's unwashed gym socks, the disgusting, oozing, almost heroic world of Victorian sewers. Yes. For tonight's sleep story, you're not drifting off to fairy tales or rolling meadows. You're descending into the underbelly of 19th century London, a place so foul it made grown men cry and small dogs contemplate a better life as a cat. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, crank up your fan for some white noise, and get comfortable. Seriously, get as comfy as you can, because you're about to time travel into a world where a midnight flush was a bucket to the face and going viral meant dysentery. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered, what did London really smell like before indoor plumbing? How many different ways can you ruin a pair of shoes in a single city street? Why did the Thames occasionally catch on fire? And was that technically an improvement? What would you do if your job was literally to wade waist-deep through Victorian soup, armed only with a shovel, a lantern, and the world's lowest OSHA standards? Did Victorians invent the manhole just so they could climb out and run away? Tonight, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1858, the year of the Great Stink. You're standing at the edge of a London sewer, your nostrils quivering, your boots already regretting everything. Good luck, my friend. It's June 1858, and London is marinating in a heat wave. The River Thames, main artery, main sewer, and main biohazard, has decided to share its perfume with the entire city. You step outside and the air is so thick with rot and sewage it feels like biting into a warm, meaty fog. Welcome to the Great Stink. People are passing out, Parliament is fleeing, and the local rats are demanding hazard pay. Let's set the scene. You've just left your stuffy room, hoping for a breath of fresh air. Bad idea. What hits you instead is a smell so intense it feels like a personal attack. The Thames is, quite literally, fermenting in the sun, a slow-cooked stew of everything London has to offer. Household waste, factory runoff, 1,000 dead cats, and the broken dreams of anyone who invested in riverside property. You take a breath through your mouth, but it's no better. The air has texture. It tastes like someone boiled an old gym sock in cabbage water and piped it straight to your sinuses. The city, always noisy, is strangely subdued. People shuffle through the haze with handkerchiefs clamped over their faces, dipped in vinegar if you're posh, or just your sleeve if you're everyone else. You pass a gentleman fainting theatrically into a pile of horse manure. No one bothers to help. Even the street urchins have given up pickpocketing. There's nothing left to steal except the last scraps of dignity from anyone caught breathing near the river. And there, rising above it all, is the Thames itself. Once romanticized in poetry, it's now the main villain in everyone's personal hygiene story. The water, if you can call it that, slops against the embankment like something alive, bubbling and frothing with a thick scum. Somewhere in the distance, a boatman is frantically rowing upstream, possibly just to escape the smell, or possibly to see if France is hiring. It's not just unpleasant, it's dangerous. You hear stories of people being taken ill after just a stroll by the water. The newspapers call it noxious effluvia. Scientists call it miasma. You call it, why did I even get out of bed this morning? There are rumors that the very air is poisonous, that disease floats through the streets like a ghost with a grudge. Everyone's got a theory, but no one's got a solution. Parliament is meeting to debate whether they should do something about the river or just burn London to the ground and start over. Let's talk coping strategies. Some people try to mask the smell by hanging sheets soaked in chloride of lime from their windows. Others dab themselves with perfume or walk around with little jars of smelling salts tucked up their sleeves. The local apothecary is doing a brisk trade in eau de notte today, Satan. A few people are even chewing cloves or garlic in the hopes that it will balance the humours. You give it a try. Now you smell like garbage bread. Congratulations. If you're unlucky enough to work near the water, say in Parliament, you find yourself the star of a tragicomedy. The government tries to conduct business while the river outside practically climbs through the windows. Important men are seen fleeing with their wigs askew, desperate for a breeze. There are serious discussions about moving the entire government inland. You picture a parliament of politicians gathered in a field, all of them still clutching their noses, arguing over whose turn it is to blame the previous administration. By sundown, the city sags under the weight of the heat and stink. You trudge home, nostrils numb, and realize you've become acclimated, if not immune, then at least resigned. In bed, you pull a sheet over your face and try to dream of a future where rivers are just rivers, not ominous soup. Good luck. In London, summer is just beginning, and the great stink is a guest who never knows when to leave. Let's move on. It's time to meet the true unsung heroes of this saga, the night soil men who dare to face the stink head-on. Tonight, you are a night soil man. One of the anonymous heroes shoveling human waste out of London's privies. Your alarm clock is a neighbour vomiting out the window. Armed with a bucket and a 1,000-yard stare, you descend into darkness, literally and metaphorically. The only upside? No one will ever steal your lunch at work. It's midnight. And while respectable London sleeps, or at least pretends to, your shift is just beginning. You pull on your thickest boots, cracked leather, patched with whatever was handy last week, and still not nearly waterproof enough. You wrap a rag around your face, more for morale than hygiene, and light a lantern whose main job is to illuminate just how bad your life choices are. There's no badge, no uniform, no union, and certainly no hazard pay. The job description? Simple. Collect, carry, and try not to make eye contact with your own reflection. Your route takes you down narrow alleys where the houses crowd together like nervous sheep, every backyard hiding a cesspit. The city above is dark and silent, but the world beneath your feet is alive, with a soundscape of drips, squelches, and the occasional haunting splash. You're greeted by the same customers every night, some awake and apologetic, some asleep and blissfully ignorant of what's about to happen in their backyard. You work by lamplight, shoveling what Victorians delicately called night soil into barrels and buckets, each shovelful a fresh reminder that human civilization is mostly just organized filth management. The air down here is layered. First, there's the sweet tang of old waste, ripe from a week of fermentation. Under that, the sour whiff of rotting food, cabbage leaves, and dead rats, with just a hint of industrial runoff from the local tanneries and breweries. Some nights, if you're lucky, a stray breeze carries the perfume of someone's half-burned dinner, but mostly it's a nose-watering medley best not described. Your nostrils go on strike. Your eyes water so much you start to suspect you're being emotionally manipulated by the sewer itself. You're not alone. Your co-workers are a mix of grizzled veterans and unlucky new hires. There's old Tom, who claims he's seen things down here that would make a corpse blush, and Billy, who brings a harmonica and insists on playing cheerful tunes, possibly as a cry for help. You bond over the shared trauma of discovering what people throw away. Wedding rings, teeth, socks, half a roast chicken, a note reading, "Please forgive me," and once, disturbingly, a live eel that seemed entirely too pleased with its living arrangement. Let's be honest. This job is a masterclass in humility. You used to have dreams. Maybe you'd open a pub or at least work above ground. Now, your main ambition is to avoid slipping and being memorialized as that bloke who drowned in a privy. You have nightmares about dropping your lantern and being left in the dark, ankle deep in Victorian fondue, with only the rats for company. Speaking of rats, they're the real lords of the night, running their own economy and showing you exactly zero respect. You learn quickly to keep your boots on, your mouth shut, and your fingers away from anything that moves. Still, there are perks. For one, nobody judges your appearance. You could show up in a wedding dress and an octopus hat. And as long as you're emptying the cesspits, no one bats an eye. Plus, you develop a sense of camaraderie found nowhere else. An us against the world. And also the smell bond that only gets stronger as dawn approaches, and you trudge back through the city, buckets emptied, dignity slightly less so. As the sun rises, you emerge, exhausted but triumphant. You've done your part to keep the city just this side of chaos. You strip off your boots, soak your hands in vinegar, and collapse into bed, hoping for a dreamless sleep. If anyone asks what you do for a living, you just smile and say, public health. They'll never know the half of it. Now, let's get to the real question. What exactly did people flush? Spoiler, it wasn't just waste. Let's talk about flushing before flushing existed. Londoners are throwing everything down the drain. Ashes, spoiled food, dead pets, half a shoe, the family's dignity. Every object is a potential sewer souvenir. You learn quickly not to poke anything with a stick unless you want a surprise lesson in Victorian taxonomy. Your average Victorian household isn't exactly equipped with the modern miracle of a flush toilet. Most homes still rely on chamber pots, privies, or, if you're especially posh, an early water closet that's really just an enthusiastic bucket. But here's the fun part. Absolutely everything goes into the waste stream. If it fits, it ships. The chamber pot isn't just for last night's regrets. It's a general-purpose trash bin. Out goes the washing water, the bones from Sunday's roast, and the family's secret stash of potato peels, all dumped with a casual disregard for where it might end up. Sometimes, you're convinced the drains have become a form of Victorian wish fulfillment. Lost a sock? Toss it. Old love letter? Gone. Wedding ring you accidentally dropped after a disappointing anniversary? The sewer will never tell. There's a strange sense of freedom in it, as if Londoners are using the city's pipes as a collective therapy session. Every flush is a tiny declaration. I will never think about this again, and you don't, at least, not until it comes sloshing back during the next heavy rain. But the real mystery starts when you look at what ends up in the river. The Thames becomes a liquid time capsule. Fish swim between hunks of coal, tangled rags, and objects that defy explanation. You spot a suspiciously human-looking doll, a rusty cutlery set, and what might be the beginnings of a small raft. The riverbank is a treasure trove for anyone brave, or foolish, enough to dig through it. Street children comb through the sludge for coins, bits of metal, and anything that can be cleaned, dried, and sold. For the rest of London, the river is a black hole. Everything goes in, but nothing good ever comes out. But why stop at inanimate objects? It's not unusual to find dead pets, dogs, cats, the occasional songbird, sent off on a watery farewell by owners who can't face a backyard burial. If you're feeling sentimental, just remember that next time you dip your toes in the Thames, you're sharing the water with generations of dearly departed goldfish. And don't forget the live wildlife. Eels thrive in the sewers, feasting on the endless buffet of London's leftovers. If you're lucky, you might spot one making a daring escape into a household drain. It's their city too. Household flushing habits also reveal a certain inventiveness. Ashes from the hearth, straight into the street gutter, then down the nearest drain. Broken dishes? Better to smash them to bits and let the rain finish the job. Shoes worn down to the sole? Toss them and hope they float away. One legendary night, someone even dumped an entire wooden wardrobe into the sewer. No one's quite sure how it fit, but local legend says you can still hear the ghost of the armoire knocking for release on foggy nights. But for all the mystery, the most disturbing part is the things you can't see. The invisible wave of chemicals, medicines, dyes, and household cleaners, all mixing into a caustic cocktail. Victorians are nothing if not enthusiastic about their remedies. Mercury pills, lead ointments, arsenic powders, all washed away with a cheery good riddance. The result? The river foams in colours not found in nature and occasionally smokes when it rains. It's both horrifying and, somehow, the most Victorian thing imaginable. So next time you drop your phone in the toilet, spare a thought for your ancestors who made every flush a leap of faith and a test of plumbing. Because in Victorian London, what goes down must eventually come up, often in the most inconvenient and aromatic ways possible. Now, let's drift a little closer to the source of all this watery chaos, the Thames itself. More than just water, but certainly less than just sewage. The mighty Thames, source of drinking water, floating landfill, and occasional destination for unlucky goldfish. You approach the riverbank. The water looks like stew and smells like a dare. Londoners try not to make eye contact with the river. Some just call it the soup. Standing on the bank, you're met with a sight that manages to be both majestic and mildly traumatizing. The Thames winds through the city like a sludgy spine, carrying with it centuries of stories, and at least a couple centuries worth of refuse. The surface is alive with activity, but it's not the kind of wildlife that makes you want to take up fishing. Flecks of grease shimmer on top, punctuated by bobbing lumps of unidentifiable matter. A gentle breeze stirs up a medley of aromas. Old cabbage, spoiled beer, and just a hint of industrial regret. You watch as boats glide by, some ferrying passengers, others hauling cargo, and a select few, called sludge boats, doing the unenviable job of shipping out London's waste. Sometimes the boatsmen wave, sometimes they just look straight ahead, silently pleading with the universe for stronger stomachs. The fish, for their part, are the true survivors here. Eels slither through the muck with all the grace of seasoned sewer dwellers, growing plump and philosophical on whatever floats past. You wonder briefly if eating one would give you special powers, or just an unforgettable stomachache. But here's the thing. Despite its obvious drawbacks, the Thames is the beating heart of London. It's the city's highway, water source, and all-purpose trash chute. Children splash at the edges, occasionally searching for treasure, or at minimum, something that isn't actively biting back. You spot a group of urchins fishing with lines made of twine, hopeful for anything vaguely edible. Every so often, there's a ripple of excitement when someone pulls up a half-decent catch, followed immediately by several adults warning, "Don't eat that, you'll turn green." Advice learned the hard way. If you lived upriver, the Thames was your lifeline. If you lived downriver, it was more of a threat. Everyone upstream dumps, everyone downstream drinks. The water is so full of surprises that some Londoners keep an emergency stash of ale, because, let's face it, weak beer is the city's true health plan. The joke is that the Thames runs in two directions, east to the sea and straight to your nightmares. The river has other moods too. During hot spells, it bubbles and stews, the rising temperature coaxing every buried secret to the surface. In winter, it slows to a viscous crawl, an ice-choked reminder that fresh is only ever a relative concept. In both cases, The smell is legendary. You get used to it, or you move to the countryside. Of course, the river isn't just a health hazard, it's also a stage for some of London's most iconic scenes. Rowers train for races with admirable determination, noses pinched shut. Aristocrats and artists sketch the water from a safe distance, making it look almost picturesque. But the real artists are the sewer hunters and mudlarks, folks who wade into the shallows searching for coins, scraps of metal, and the occasional piece of Victorian jewellery. You see one now, knee-deep in the sludge, holding up a soggy purse and declaring himself the richest man on the riverbank. For a moment, you're almost inspired. Then the wind shifts, and the smell brings you crashing back to reality. In polite company, the Thames is called the lifeblood of the city. In private, it's that god-awful soup. People debate whether it's better to live near the river for convenience or far enough away that your laundry never comes back smelling like a failed science experiment. For most, it's a compromise. Fetch water at dawn, keep your windows shut, and try not to think about what's floating past your doorstep. As night falls, the river glows in the lantern light, swirling with mystery and misfortune. You turn away, promising yourself you'll never complain about your tap water again. After all, the Thames is more than just water. It's history, survival, and 1,000 regrettable flushes all swirling together. Next, let's meet London's most notorious party crasher, cholera, the guest nobody invited but everyone got. You can't have a good Victorian sleep story without a cameo from cholera. It sweeps through the city like a pop-up food truck serving disaster. People debate whether it's caused by bad air or something mysterious in the water. Spoiler: it's the water. Everyone's drinking diluted diarrhea and pretending it's fine. It starts quietly, as these things always do. You hear the word whispered in the street, in the pub, behind the counter at the apothecary. Cholera. At first, it sounds like just another nuisance, another tale to frighten the children, like the ghost in the wardrobe or the tax collector. But then people start dropping, not just the sickly, not just the old, but strong young men and entire families. It feels like something supernatural, a punishment from the gods, or, more likely, a revenge prank from the Thames itself. Doctors have ideas, but not helpful ones. The best minds in London gather to debate the cause. Is it bad air, rising from the river like a malevolent souffle? Is it curses, or bad luck, or eating pickled onions on a Thursday? One physician sniffs the wind and declares, with confidence only a Victorian can muster, miasma, the theory that invisible stinky vapours cause disease. You listen, half convinced, as he recommends opening windows and burning incense. Another expert suggests bathing less, to avoid opening the pores. Scientific rigour. Meet the Middle Ages. Meanwhile, cholera moves faster than the rumours. People fall ill in the morning and can be gone by nightfall. It's not a subtle disease. It announces itself with stomach cramps, vomiting, and a special effect the Victorians called rice water stools, a phrase you will never unhear. It's terrifying and humiliating, leaving the afflicted so dehydrated their skin takes on a blue, waxy sheen. Neighbours leave food at the doorstep and whisper prayers. Children are told not to drink from the pump, not to play by the river, and to avoid Mrs. Wilkins, who once sneezed and looked a bit peaky. But there's a special, unspoken terror. Nobody knows who's next. You can scrub your hands raw, hold your breath, even move to a different part of town. But cholera doesn't respect boundaries. If your neighbour gets it, you might as well start writing your will. The city scrambles for solutions. Authorities pour barrels of lime into the gutters, hoping to purify the filth. Some households hang pungent herbs by the door. Others smear tar around windowsills. one overzealous landlord sets fire to his own privy, briefly achieving a new kind of stink. The rich fare little better than the poor. Disease doesn't care if you have a carriage or a chamber pot made of gold. Even Parliament is spooked, forced to admit between retchings that something must be done. You watch as politicians argue over whether to fix the sewers or simply outlaw dying within city limits. A few wise souls, like Dr. John Snow, start to suspect the truth. He maps cholera cases and realizes they cluster around water pumps. One bold move, removing the handle from the Broad Street pump, saves hundreds of lives. Science, finally, begins to win, but not soon enough for everyone. By the end of the summer, the city is changed. You know people who are gone, houses that stand empty, and streets that seem quieter than before. But you also see the beginnings of real progress. New sewers, cleaner water, and a slow, determined effort to beat the stink. London, battered but stubborn, decides it's time to clean up, one flush at a time. So, if you're feeling thirsty, maybe think twice before you reach for that glass of Thames water. Next up, meet the sewer hunters, those brave souls who dive into this chaos, hoping to make a living from other people's waste. Some people actually make a living scavenging in the sewers. Lost coins, stray rings, chunks of coal, mysterious objects with a pulse, you name it, someone's trying to sell it. You join the hunt. Your rivals, rats, other desperate humans, and your own sense of shame. You might think no one would willingly spend their days crawling through London's dankest tunnels. But in Victorian times, necessity always finds a way. Enter the sewer hunters, also known as toshers, professional risk-takers with a keen eye for valuables and a much lower standard for what counts as a good day. Their uniform? A battered lantern, sturdy boots, patched trousers, and the vague hope that tetanus is just a rumor. You start your shift at the edge of a manhole, prying it open with a crowbar that's older than you are. The city's asleep, but you're wide awake, lowering yourself into a world most people prefer not to imagine. It's dark, wet, and echoing with the distant drip of water and the closer, more ominous scuttle of rats. You flick on your lamp, revealing glistening walls lined with history and possibly several generations of unsolved mysteries. The air is thick, a potent blend of ammonia, rotting vegetable peels, and a mysterious undertone that can only be described as London, distilled. The tosher's job is simple but dangerous. Find something, anything, of value before the tunnels flood, collapse, or belch out a toxic cloud. You learn quickly to spot the difference between mud and not mud. Sometimes it's coins, washed out of someone's pocket on a drunken stumble home. Sometimes it's jewelry, rings, and brooches that slip down a drain, forever separated from their owners by fate, gravity, and questionable plumbing. And sometimes it's coal, swept in from the gasworks, just waiting to be shoveled up and resold. Of course, you're not alone. The tunnels are crowded in their own way. Rats as big as small dogs, eels slithering through puddles, and the occasional competitor with a lantern in the distance. Toshers have their own unspoken rules. If someone calls dibs on a promising-looking pile, you move on. If you hear shouting, you run. And if something hisses at you from the shadows, you definitely don't poke it with a stick. The real rivalry is for the best routes, places where storm runoff regularly dumps the city's accidental wealth. Senior toshers guard their secrets as fiercely as any banker. You quickly realize that luck is as valuable as skill. Sometimes you find nothing but broken crockery and unidentifiable sludge. Other nights you stumble on a handful of pennies, a lost silver spoon, or, on a legendary occasion, a gold pocket watch, still ticking, as if determined to outlast its owner. There are stories of men making fortunes in a single night. And other stories. told in lower voices, of those who never came back at all. Then there's the paperwork, or lack thereof. Officially, sewer hunting is illegal. Unofficially, everyone looks the other way. The city needs the toshers, after all. They do the work no one else will, removing blockages, rescuing valuables, and, every now and then, discovering evidence of a crime the police would rather not investigate. You keep your finds quiet and your head down. When you surface at dawn, you look like you've been through 3 natural disasters and a minor existential crisis. Still, there's a peculiar satisfaction to the job. You pocket your earnings, clean off as much filth as you can, and share a knowing nod with other hunters. Your work keeps London running, at least slightly less clogged than it would be otherwise. And tomorrow, you'll go back. The city's secrets don't stay buried for long. Now, let's look up from the muck and meet the man who declared war on filth itself. Sir Joseph Bazalgette, engineer and accidental saviour of the Victorian nose. It's time to meet the ultimate Victorian superhero, Sir Joseph Bazalgette, the engineer who looked at the river of filth and thought, let's fix that. You get a front row seat to his war on waste, armed with blueprints, bricks, and more patience than anyone should ever have. You're standing at the edge of the Thames, clutching your hat as yet another foul breeze slaps you in the face. Parliament is in meltdown, cholera is running the city, and most Londoners are still convinced disease travels through bad air and wishful thinking. Into this chaos strides Joseph Bazalgette, a man with a mustache of biblical proportions and the iron will of someone who's eaten one too many riverside lunches. His mission? Build a sewer system so effective, so audacious, that it drags London kicking and screaming into something resembling public health. Bazalgette is, at heart, an optimist. He surveys the mess and sees opportunity. Where others see a city marinating in its own backstory, he sees the chance for progress. Armed with a pocketful of pencils and the world's most judgmental notebook, he sketches out a plan. And not just any plan. This is a 1,100-mile network of brick-lined tunnels, pumping stations, and intercepting sewers, an underground labyrinth capable of moving the waste of 2 million people away from the city and out to sea, where, presumably, the French can deal with it. Of course, convincing anyone to pay for this is another matter. Politicians, being politicians, are more interested in arguing about the cost than in dying of typhoid. Bazalgette attends endless meetings. His patience tested by men who ask whether it wouldn't be cheaper to just move the entire city. He responds with the calm certainty of a man who's seen things he can never unsee. Eventually, after much debate, Parliament finally relents. The funds are approved, the workers hired, and the battle begins. Building the new sewers is a spectacle. Streets are torn up, bricks are stacked into perfect arches, and workers vanish underground for weeks at a time. It's a marvel of Victorian engineering, and a marvel that nobody is buried in concrete by accident. Bazalgette himself is everywhere, pacing the muddy banks, barking instructions, checking and rechecking his calculations. His secret weapon? He over-engineers everything. Where the city asks for a tunnel big enough for today's waste, Bazalgette doubles the size. Londoners scoff. Overkill, they say. But a century and a half later, the system still works. Never underestimate the power of a man with a grudge against bad plumbing. Of course, there are setbacks. Workers fall ill. Floods disrupt progress. At one memorable moment, a shipment of bricks is discovered to be mostly mud and hope. Bazalgette pushes on, undeterred. The city, meanwhile, watches in awe and occasional terror as enormous pumping stations, some adorned with stained glass and gold leaf because why not, rise from the riverbanks. Victorian excess meets Victorian necessity. And for once, everyone agrees it's money well spent. As the years pass, the tide, literally, begins to turn. The stench recedes. The cholera outbreaks fade. Children once again risk paddling at the river's edge without being dissolved. By 1875, Bazalgette's dream is reality. A city where the water flows, the waste goes elsewhere, and the most dangerous thing in the Thames is a disgruntled swan. So next time you flush, spare a moment for Sir Joseph Bazalgette, a man who fought the Great Stink with bricks and stubbornness and won. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that true heroes don't wear capes, they wear high boots, carry blueprints, and make sure nobody ever has to live through another summer like 1858. Next, let's take a deep, careful breath and explore the symphony of smells that made every London stroll a gamble. The city's infamous nose orchestra. Every city has a scent. Victorian London has a full orchestra. You take a deep breath, instantly regret it. Each neighborhood has its own signature aroma. Tanneries, breweries, open cesspools. Even the posh districts can't escape odor swamp. As you wander through the winding streets, it becomes clear. London's greatest musical export isn't classical or folk. It's the daily symphony performed by 10,000 different sources of stink, layered together in bold harmony. Your nose becomes an unwilling conductor, picking out the soloists like fresh horse manure, rotting cabbage, and the unmistakable tang of boiling soap, and trying to drown out the rest. Let's start at the docks, where the Thames laps hungrily against battered wharves. Here, the air is a pungent cocktail of dead fish, wet rope, and the sweet but sinister notes of decaying fruit. Fishermen dump their leftovers straight into the river, confident that whatever the eels don't eat will simply dissolve into legend. A sharp breeze stirs it all up and blows it into the city, carrying with it the delicate perfume of old oysters and failed ambition. Venture into the markets and you're hit by a new medley. Piles of vegetable peelings fermenting in the summer sun, blood from the butcher's stalls swirling into the gutters, and clouds of smoke from a dozen open-air fires. Here, onions and turnips go toe-to-toe with sheep intestines and yesterday's fish. Vendors shout over the chaos, hawking their wares and waving flies away with grim determination. You marvel that anyone has an appetite at all, but in London, hunger is stronger than smell. Turn a corner and enter the industrial quarters, where tanneries and breweries hold court. The tanneries, true to form, assault you with the heavy reek of animal hides, marinating in vats of urine, lime, and unspeakable chemicals. You try not to breathe too deeply, but curiosity and the need to keep moving gets the better of you. The breweries offer little relief. The promise of warm bread and fresh ale is quickly overpowered by the swampy smell of spent grain and yeast. Somewhere between the two, a chimney belches out a cloud of coal smoke, leaving a layer of soot on your tongue. You might think the wealthy neighborhoods fare better, but even the grandest mansions can't seal out the city's signature notes. Behind manicured hedges and heavy drapes, maids battle an endless war against mold, mildew, and the spirit of the drains. Perfume bottles litter the vanity tables, and guests arrive clutching scented handkerchiefs like shields. At parties, the most popular game is Guess What's Rotting Behind the Wainscoting. The answer, inevitably, is everything. Nightfall brings no relief. Instead, the cooler air presses the smells closer to the ground, trapping them in a thick, aromatic blanket. Candles sputter in the windows, their faint fragrance fighting a losing battle against waves of kitchen smoke and the eternal funk of unwashed humanity. Rats scamper down alleys, tailing trails of garbage, and the city's many dogs add their own contributions to the grand olfactory fugue. Even rain can't save you. A sudden shower does little more than liquefy the day's deposits, sending rivulets of questionable origin racing toward the nearest drain. The air grows humid and steamy, amplifying every note. On days like this, London doesn't just smell, it marinates. By the end of your stroll, your nose is overwhelmed. Your clothes have taken on a life of their own, and you've developed a new respect for the power of scented candles and fresh air. You realize the true miracle of London isn't that people survived the smell, it's that anyone managed to fall in love, eat dinner, or sleep through the night. And now, after this nose-wrinkling tour, let's address one of life's most pressing questions. Where do you go when there's nowhere to go? The Privy Dilemma is waiting. Imagine needing the toilet in a city with 2 million people and exactly 6 public conveniences. You pace the streets, clutching your stomach, eyeing every dark alley with desperation. The local advice: hold it or lower your standards. It's late afternoon in Victorian London, and the city is bustling. Vendors are shouting, carriages are rumbling, and your bladder has entered crisis negotiations. Public toilets, if you can even call them that, are rare and frequently broken. For most Londoners, the answer to where do I go is a choose-your-own-adventure with only bad endings. At home, you might have a chamber pot, fine, until you remember whose job it is to empty it. If you're a little wealthier, maybe a privy in the backyard, a wooden shed perched above a pit that's seen too much. For everyone else, the world is your urinal, and so is your neighbour's wall. There's a reason every alleyway in London smells like a confession booth for the desperate. The cobblestones glisten suspiciously, especially after dark. If you're lucky, you find a quiet spot. If you're unlucky, you find the police, who, desperate to keep up appearances, have begun fining people for public nuisance. You'd argue, but it's hard to be eloquent when you're crossing your legs and sweating bullets. Public conveniences do exist, but they're more concept than reality. Early examples are small brick structures that charge a penny for access, a price some people can't or won't pay. Lines stretch out the door. You queue behind people of all ages, all united by one thing: the increasingly urgent dance. The inside isn't much better. A row of wooden seats perched over a trough, no walls, no doors. Just the comforting presence of your fellow sufferers. Privacy is a luxury for the rich. For everyone else, it's time to make new friends. Ladies have it even worse. The few facilities that exist are for men only, as if Victorian society just quietly agreed that women don't have bodily functions. If you're a woman, your options are to go at home, risk humiliation, or simply endure. Many women stay home altogether, missing out on work, socializing, or errands, because there's nowhere safe or private to answer nature's call. Inventive souls devise tricks, oversized skirts, strategic petticoats, a bold disregard for shame. But even then, the risk of being caught or harassed is high. In theory, the posh set are immune to all this. In practice, even the finest ballrooms have their own brand of toilet trauma. Imagine squeezing through a crowd in a velvet gown, only to find the chamber pot has been well used by the time you arrive. You dab your brow with a perfumed handkerchief, stare into the abyss, and contemplate a new life in the countryside. As the day goes on, the problem intensifies. The streets grow busier, the pubs fill up, and the supply of tolerable spots runs out. The city tries to cope: a few more pay toilets, stern warnings in newspapers, even a committee to study the matter. Nothing helps. London, in all its glory, is a city constantly on the verge of a public accident, and so you adapt. You plan your outings around your bladder, drink less than you should, and make a mental map of every hidden corner, sympathetic shopkeeper, or row of helpful bushes. You never forget that every drop of rain, every trickle in the gutter, is a reminder of what the city is truly lacking. The privy dilemma is more than an inconvenience. It's a daily test of creativity, patience, and pelvic fortitude. Next, let's meet the unsung style icons of the Victorian underworld, the sewer workers and their unique approach to fashion and survival. Victorian sewer workers had style. Sort of. Rubber boots, oilskins, and hats with built-in lamps, plus layers of whatever you hoped would stop the smell. You gear up and hope the rats respect your drip. It all begins before sunrise, with the ceremonial donning of the gear. You roll up your sleeves and pull on a pair of boots that could double as rowboats, cracked, patched, and so caked in old sludge that they're technically more mud than leather. Rubber boots are a luxury, and you guard yours like the crown jewels. Anyone caught borrowing them without permission risks a very public, very messy workplace duel. Over your feet go wool socks, a desperate attempt at comfort in a world that has never heard of Gore-Tex or Febreze. Next, you wriggle into your trousers, thick canvas, or, if you're lucky, oilcloth that's seen a dozen repairs and twice as many disasters. The fabric is stiff with old stains, but it's better than nothing. Shirts are equally rugged, with sleeves rolled tight to the elbow to avoid catching on any mysterious sewer debris. Or, as veterans say, London's lost and found. Over everything, a sturdy waistcoat or coat is a must. Preferably one you don't mind sacrificing to the gods of grime. If you're especially cautious, you tie a scarf or a strip of fabric around your mouth and nose. It won't keep out the smell, but it might keep you from actually tasting it. On your hands, you wear gloves, thick leather if you're rolling in money, fingerless wool if you're rolling in regret. They're there to protect against sharp stones, rusty nails, and the inevitable moment when something in the darkness decides to wiggle back. No matter how tough your gloves are, you know you'll be washing your hands with vinegar and prayer when the shift ends. But the crowning glory is always the hat. Sewer fashion demands a hat with a purpose, wide-brimmed to deflect falling gunk, sturdy enough to fend off low-hanging bricks, and, for the high-tech crowd, fitted with a lamp. Some hats sport little cages to protect the candle's flame. Others have built-in holders for an oil lantern, which you adjust with one nervous eye on the nearest methane bubble. There's nothing quite like the thrill of crawling through a narrow pipe, sweat dripping, and realizing your candle is guttering out in the world's least romantic setting. Accessories are a mark of experience. Veterans tuck their lunch, wrapped in oilskin, into a chest pocket, well away from the splash zone. Some carry a stout stick for testing puddles, because nothing says bad day like accidentally stepping into a hole deeper than your dignity. And let's not forget the all-important pocketful of salt or camphor. You sniff it before braving a particularly nasty stretch of tunnel. It doesn't help, but it gives you hope. The look is less Paris runway and more apocalypse survivor, but there's a strange pride in it. On the surface, you're ignored or pitied. Below ground, you're a warrior in a homemade suit of armor, respected by your peers and occasionally saluted by a passing rat. It's a dirty badge of honor, proof you've faced London's worst and lived to smell the tale. And at the end of the shift, you strip it all off, piece by piece, with the care of someone diffusing a bomb. Every garment is hung to dry, aired out in the vain hope that one day the smell will leave. Spoiler, it won't. Now, with your outfit complete and your nerves fraying, it's time for dinner. Would you eat a fish from the Thames? Don't answer yet. Let's find out how hungry you really are. Dinner time. Would you risk eating a fish caught from the Thames? The answer, shockingly, is yes. If you're hungry enough and have made peace with your digestive system's mortality. You sample the catch of the day. It tastes like regret with a hint of laundry. Fishing along the Thames is a gamble. You settle on a creaky wooden pier, eyes squinting into the murky water that bubbles with secrets. Beside you, an old fisherman swears he once pulled up a perch the size of a loaf of bread and twice as sour. His bait? Anything that floats, he says, threading a scrap of gristle onto a rusty hook. The river's eels slither past, fat and defiant, and you wonder what, exactly, they've been eating. Probably last week's laundry and someone's missing shoe. Children cluster on the banks, tossing in string lines baited with worm, cheese, or, on special occasions, a crust of bread swiped from breakfast. Catching anything at all is an occasion for cheers, laughter, and immediate negotiation. The unlucky fish is inspected, sniffed, poked, and debated. Is it safe to eat? Does it have too many eyes? Does it glow in the dark? These are the important culinary questions of Victorian London. The truth is, for much of the city, the Thames is both pantry and trash can. On a good day, you might catch roach, dace, or a hardy bream. On a bad day, you catch something unclassifiable, which either becomes tomorrow's bait or a new urban legend. If you're bold, you fry your catch right on the bank. Someone's always got a skillet and a handful of salt. The air fills with a smell that tries to pass for fish but mostly reminds you of damp socks and ash. One bite in, you're hit with a texture somewhere between pudding and sandpaper. The real risk isn't in the fishing, but in the eating. You try not to think about what else shares the water, raw sewage, industrial dyes, the ghosts of 1,000 failed recipes. Still, protein is protein. The family gathers around, eager for something that isn't pottage or boiled cabbage. Dinner conversation is a mix of bravado and gallows humor. If I sprout fins by morning, someone jokes, at least I'll be able to swim for the hills. Health warnings, such as they are, come from experience rather than science. Grandmothers mutter that river fish put hair on your chest. Doctors, when asked, recommend plenty of ale to wash it down. You follow the local wisdom and chase every bite with a mug of something strong just in case. Survival in Victorian London, after all, is about calculated risk and selective memory. It's not just the poor who turn to the Thames for food. Even fancy restaurants have been known to serve freshwater fish, conveniently silent on the details. There are rumours of black market eel pies making their way into the city's posher dining rooms. You imagine a nobleman, monocle quivering, biting into a pastry filled with something that might once have been alive, or at least aquatic. Yet, through all this, the city endures. People adapt, and so do their stomachs. Riverfish becomes a staple, and the fear of what's floating in the Thames is filed away with all the other daily worries. By the time you scrape your plate clean, you're grateful for a warm meal, even if it does taste like low tide. Next up, let's talk about something even more explosive than last night's fish dinner. The problem of Victorian sewers going boom. When the pipes go out with a bang, everyone takes notice. Here's a fun fact. Sometimes the sewers exploded. Methane, candlelight, and a city-wide disregard for basic science. What could possibly go wrong? You light a lantern and try not to become Victorian confetti. Let's start with the chemistry. The sewers of Victorian London are a bubbling cauldron, constantly brewing their own potent cocktail of gases. Human waste, rotten vegetables, industrial sludge, and animal carcasses all get mashed together and left to stew in the dark. The result? Methane, hydrogen sulfide, and other gases with names that sound like villains from a medical textbook. These invisible guests gather quietly, waiting for the perfect opportunity, a spark, a flame, or an especially reckless rat to make their grand entrance. Of course, nobody really understands this yet. Scientific knowledge is still catching up to everyday disaster. Sewer workers, those brave, barely paid souls, trudge through tunnels with nothing but lanterns and optimism. The air shimmers with the unmistakable scent of doom. But a job's a job. Sometimes, the first warning sign is a faint hiss. Sometimes it's a sudden rumble beneath your boots. Other times, it's the thrilling realization that your candle is burning much, much brighter than normal. And then, boom, the explosion starts with a muffled thud, like a giant holding in a sneeze, and ends with bricks flying, windows rattling, and a fountain of filth erupting onto the street above. You're walking down Fleet Street when suddenly the pavement lurches and a geyser of Victorian stew paints everyone within range. Hats fly, horses bolt, and even the most stoic Londoners lose their legendary composure. The newspapers call it a remarkable inconvenience. You call it a new low in your relationship with city life. Sometimes the aftermath is more memorable than the explosion itself. Sewer workers emerge from manholes, covered in grime and looking mildly offended by physics. Neighbors peer out their windows, noses wrinkled, and children gather to poke at the carnage with sticks. The city swings into action, sending engineers to investigate. The diagnosis: unfortunate accumulation of gases. The cure: dig up the street, let things air out, and hope for the best. Someone inevitably suggests banning open flames underground. Someone else laughs, lights a pipe, and the cycle begins anew. If you're lucky, nobody gets hurt. If you're unlucky, the explosion causes a chain reaction, collapsing tunnels and flooding basements. Whole sections of road disappear overnight, swallowed by the Earth's angry digestive system. Shopkeepers complain about unexpected inventory loss. Bakers wonder why the bread tastes faintly of mystery. The city shrugs and moves on. After all, it's not the first time, and it won't be the last. For the truly adventurous, there's an opportunity hidden in every disaster. Toshers and mudlarks sometimes wait for explosions, hoping the chaos will dislodge hidden treasures. Old coins, rings, and sometimes even a lost watch come up with the muck. It's a Victorian version of panning for gold, if gold also smelled like cabbage and failure. But the most impressive thing is how quickly Londoners adapt. By the next morning, the rubble is mostly cleared, the gossip has spread, and someone is already selling souvenir bricks from the site. The city returns to its usual routine, only slightly more cautious about lighting matches near the drains. And so, you carry on, one eye on the ground, one hand on your hat, and a new respect for the strange chemistry of daily life. Exploding sewers, just another part of the Victorian experience, equal parts danger, disaster, and the world's worst shower. Now, let's leave the tunnels for a while and see how the city's middle class coped with the stink. Sometimes through denial, sometimes with a very fancy handkerchief. Not everyone has to live with the stink, or do they? You take a stroll through a fancy neighborhood where the solution to the smell is just to wave a handkerchief dipped in perfume. Nothing to see here, except the constant parade of noses held high. Step into the world of the Victorian middle class, where the carpets are thick, the tea is strong, and the collective sense of smell is both a curse and a battleground. Here, you're expected to rise above the city's woes, preferably on a cushion of lavender-scented air. The streets are lined with elegant row houses, each one promising refuge from the chaos below. But the river's perfume is democratic. No matter how many locks you install or windows you seal, Eau de Thames finds a way in. Inside, the family prepares for daily combat. The arsenal: pomanders stuffed with cloves, sachets of dried herbs, bottles of rosewater and vinegar. There's a bowl of camphor on every mantel and someone always airing linens out the window, as if sunshine might outmuscle the miasma. Young ladies dab their wrists with floral cologne, and gentlemen keep a sprig of mint in their waistcoat. When guests arrive, The house puts on its best airs, literally. Curtains are drawn, rugs are beaten, and the faintest hint of decay is drowned in a tidal wave of imported fragrance. But denial is the city's true cologne. Conversations around the dinner table ignore the obvious, focusing instead on the weather, Queen Victoria's latest portrait, or the surprising health benefits of gooseberries. The elephant in the room is not mentioned. The real stench is silence, enforced by a code more rigid than any corset. If you must acknowledge the smell, you do so with a delicate euphemism. The drains seem a bit lively today. Or, there's a hint of river in the air. Everyone nods gravely, then resumes pretending their soup doesn't taste faintly of low tide. The city's shops are quick to capitalize. Apothecaries stock endless remedies, odor, banishing candles, atmospheric spritzes, air, improving pastilles. Some promise complete protection from foul vapors. Others simply promise to smell stronger than anything else. You purchase a jar labeled Essence of Alpine Breeze. It smells like pine needles and denial, but there are limits to what even the best perfume can do. On truly bad days, when the wind shifts and the great stink rolls in like a rude dinner guest, there's no escaping. Families flee to the countryside if they can, packing trunks and abandoning homes to the advancing tide of effluvium. Those left behind shut every window, stuff rags under doors, and pray the weather will change. Even the family cat starts eyeing the luggage. Middle-class denial extends to public life as well. At the opera, a sea of perfumed fans flutter in unison, trying to create a microclimate of not horrible. Church services grow shorter in summer, as the faithful rush through their prayers and flee before the scent becomes a test of piety. Children are told not to play near the river, not because of danger, but because it isn't suitable. Everyone knows what that means. Nobody says it. Despite the best efforts, the river wins in the end. The city's fragrances mix, mingle, and surrender. By evening, even the most determined hosts give up, admitting defeat by lighting one last scented candle and heading for bed. Dreams filled with pine forests and fresh rain. Still, there's a strange pride in London's ability to pretend. If you can survive the smell and convince yourself that everything is perfectly normal, you can survive anything. And if you can't, there's always another spritz of cologne. Next, let's follow the people who brought fresh water to the masses, the water carriers, brave souls who delivered doom one bucket at a time. Meet the water carriers, the folks bringing fresh river water to your home. You watch them haul sloshing buckets up endless stairs, smiling weakly as everyone pretends not to see the floating bits. Hydration has never been so risky. In a city where the tap is a distant dream and plumbing is a luxury reserved for the posh, most households rely on the daily visit from the water carrier. These unsung heroes, armed with brawny arms, battered yokes, and nerves of steel, are the lifeline between the Thames and your tea kettle. The job isn't glamorous. It's barely even a job. It's an endurance sport. Each morning, you hear the familiar clatter and grunt as a carrier hoists two heavy buckets, weaving through crowds, dodging horses, and praying no one sneezes in his path. The water itself is a mixed blessing. At a glance, it shimmers in the sunlight, promising refreshment and clean laundry. Look closer, and you spot suspicious flakes swirling lazily on the surface. Sometimes it's only silt, sometimes it's not. The wise let it settle, hoping gravity will separate the drinkable from the regrettable. The truly wise boil it, strain it through cloth, and then boil it again. Most don't bother. After all, if the neighbours haven't died yet, how bad can it be? Carriers develop a sort of gallows humour about the whole business. They joke that if the Thames doesn't get you, the stairs will. Hauling water to a fourth-floor garret is an Olympic feat, and all for a few pennies, just enough to buy a pint or two to forget what they've seen floating past. Some days, a child follows, begging a splash for the family's pet. Other days, a housewife meets the carrier at the door, arms crossed, demanding to know why today's batch is extra chewy. There's only so much a man can do. Their burden isn't just physical. With every bucket, they're delivering more than hydration. They're also the city's silent disease vector. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid, all hitch a ride from riverbank to breakfast table, hidden in every droplet. No one really talks about it, of course. It's impolite. When sickness comes, families blame bad air, unlucky stars, or those foreigners from Shoreditch. But deep down, everyone knows it's the water. Stupid. Competition is fierce. Dozens of water carriers race for customers, each trying to outpour the other. Some advertise extra clean water, fetched further upstream, just past the slaughterhouse, so you know it's fresh. Others boast of special barrels or secret filtration methods, which mostly involve squinting suspiciously at the bucket and hoping for the best. The wealthy sometimes hire their own dedicated man, expecting miracles. But in the end, it's all from the same murky river. Then there's the winter. When the Thames turns to slush, the buckets freeze to your hands, and you spend the morning chipping ice from the surface and praying you don't bring back more chunks than liquid. The work never stops, and neither does the city's thirst. At night, the water carriers return home, backs aching, hands blistered, and boots soaked through. They wash up with what little clean water they have left, listen to the city hum, and wait for morning to do it all again. It's a thankless task, but it keeps London alive, or at least keeps London running just ahead of its next epidemic. So next time you fill your glass, raise it to the men who carried the city's hopes and germs on their shoulders. Coming up, what happens when London decides to ship its filth out by boat? Welcome aboard the sludge boats. When London couldn't handle its own sewage, it shipped it out. Literally. You board a sludge boat, destination, somewhere else. The journey is slow, stinky, and you pray the wind is blowing the right direction. It all starts on the banks of the Thames at dawn, as the city's sewer system does its best impression of an overworked factory conveyor belt. Sewage, neatly euphemized as sludge, is collected at massive pumping stations, poured into cavernous tanks, and then loaded onto a fleet of flat-bottomed boats. You watch as men with faces hardened by years of questionable career choices shovel, scoop, and heave London's finest exports into place. A thick cloud of steam rises, mixing with the unmistakable perfume of defeat and determination. The boats themselves are marvels of industrial age optimism. Big, slow, and only slightly more pleasant than the average garbage dump, each vessel is equipped with giant metal hoppers and slatted decks that allow the river's breezes to do absolutely nothing to improve the experience. Crews board in oilskins and boots, pockets stuffed with handkerchiefs soaked in peppermint oil or vinegar. Someone always brings bread and cheese for lunch. Someone else always regrets this by noon. As you push off from the dock, the city's skyline slips behind, and you realize just how much London depends on not looking back. The destination? The open sea? Or, for some unlucky boats, farmlands outside the city, where the sludge is repackaged as fertilizer. You sit on a barrel, watch the riverbanks slide by, and try not to think about which part of the city is currently floating beneath your feet. If you're lucky, the breeze is from the west. If you're unlucky, you learn what it means to become truly, irreversibly nose-blind. For the crew, life aboard a sludge boat is a mixture of monotony and vigilance. There are tales of barrels coming loose in rough weather, bursting open and repainting the deck in a shade best left unnamed. More than one man has slipped, tumbled overboard, and re-emerged a changed person, forever banned from polite company and family dinners. The river, for all its perils, at least offers a moving target for the city's waste. Every so often, a curious sturgeon or eel pops up beside the boat, stares at you with soulful, world-weary eyes, and then dives back to reconsider its life choices. Sludge disposal is not a glamorous job, but it's essential. The city's very survival depends on the daily exodus of its own filth. On the worst days, when the sewers are backed up and the docks overflow, extra boats are pressed into service. Sometimes old barges, sometimes anything that floats. There's a running joke that if the city ever runs out of boats, the waste will just stack up until Londoners have to walk to work on stilts. Sometimes, the boats don't make it far before springing a leak or running aground on a sandbar. Then, the crew is forced to improvise, bailing out the hold, patching up holes, and swearing never to complain about rainy days again. For those who survive a full season, there's a kind of pride. You've helped keep London just this side of livable. And so, every week, the sludge boats do their rounds. Anonymous, tireless, and always a little tragic. You stand on deck, take one last look at the city's horizon, and hope tomorrow's load is lighter, or at least less explosive. Next, let's descend below deck and see what's really lurking in the sewers: rats, eels, and other wildlife you never asked to meet. You're not alone down here. The sewers are teeming with life, if by life you mean rats the size of bread loaves, acrobatic eels, and creatures you hope will never be named. You make friends with a sewer rat. He's seen some things. The first thing you notice as you descend into the tunnels isn't the darkness or even the smell, it's the movement. Shadows dart across the walls. Something skitters just out of sight, splashing through ankle-deep water with a confidence you can only envy. Welcome to the true underworld of Victorian London, where evolution is working overtime and everyone has a story to tell. Let's start with the rats. Sewer rats in London aren't your average squeaky house guests. These are muscular urban survivalists, fat on a steady diet of leftovers, and only slightly intimidated by humans. You spot one perched on a pile of refuse, calmly grooming itself as if to say, "You're in my house now." They travel in packs, moving with military precision and a total disregard for social niceties. Toshers know better than to corner a rat. These furry residents will defend their turf with tooth and tail. There are tales of legendary rats, Old Scar, Big Tom, the ghost of Cheapside, who have survived more disasters and explosions than most politicians. And then there are the eels. You'd think a fish wouldn't thrive in such conditions. But the Thames eels are born opportunists. They slither through the muck, rising from drains in slick, sinuous waves, happy to feast on anything unlucky enough to fall in. Rumour has it these eels grow to prodigious lengths, sometimes longer than a child's arm. Toshers claim that if you listen closely, you can hear them whispering financial advice to the rats. Whether true or not, they're a constant presence, sometimes turning up on dinner plates as a pie or, if you're brave, as a midnight snack. Of course, these are only the stars of the show. The sewers also play host to an entire supporting cast of wildlife. Cockroaches, spiders, and centipedes dart through cracks and crevices, each looking for their own piece of the pie. Sometimes, literally, frogs find their way in, croaking mournfully, as if they know they've made a terrible mistake. Occasionally, a stray cat gets trapped in the maze, forced to make alliances with the locals, or, more likely, retreat in dignified horror. It's not just animals. Strange fungi cling to the damp walls, glowing faintly in the dark. as if auditioning for the part of Victorian nightlight. Some toshers swear they've seen new species of bugs and beetles, never before catalogued by science, and for good reason. If you ever spot something with more than 8 legs, the advice is simple. Don't ask, don't touch, don't bring it home, for all the risks. There's a grudging respect between the sewer's human workers and its wild residents. Rats keep the tunnels tidy by eating scraps. Eels deal with anything organic, no questions asked. And while the occasional face-off occurs, often over a particularly juicy morsel, there's an unspoken understanding. Everyone's just trying to get by. Some toshers have even named their favorite rats and leave scraps as tribute, half out of superstition, half out of loneliness. In a way, the wildlife are the true survivors of London's underbelly, adaptable, resilient, and utterly unbothered by the chaos overhead. They were here before the sewers, and they'll be here long after the last boat sails. Next, let's see what happens when you try to wash off all this grime. Is Victorian soap up to the task, or is it just another layer in the city's ongoing perfume? Welcome to Soap and Squalor. After a day in the sewers, how do you even begin to feel clean? Victorian soap is ambitious. You scrub, you scrape, you debate starting a new life as a chimney sweep, but the smell lingers like a guilty secret. Let's start with the basics. Water. You want hot water, but your choices are cold water from the pump, tepid rainwater from a barrel, or, if you're lucky, what's left in the kettle after someone else's tea. A bath means hauling bucket after bucket upstairs, boiling it over a fire, then pouring it into a tin tub that looks suspiciously like yesterday's laundry bin. The result? A tepid puddle barely deep enough to cover your ankles. If you wait too long, the water goes from inviting to suspicious, with a thin film forming on top. A sort of microbial welcome mat. Now, the soap. Victorian soap is homemade or bought from the market. Usually a hard yellow lump that claims to be pure but smells vaguely of lard and betrayal. It lathers reluctantly, like it resents being woken up, and does its best work on stains of unknown origin. Sometimes it contains leftover animal fat. Sometimes it contains sand for extra scrubbing power. If you want luxury, you splurge on carbolic soap. Medicinal and so pungent it could probably strip wallpaper, if not your dignity. You scrub and scrub and keep scrubbing. The dirt comes off in streaks, but the scent of the sewers seems baked into your skin. You worry that your neighbors will forever know you as the one who smells of adventure. Even after 3 rounds of lather, your fingernails look like you just lost a fight with a coal scuttle. Underneath the dirt, your skin is pink and raw. Victorian exfoliation, courtesy of industrial grit. Washing your hair is its own odyssey. You lean over the basin, pour cold water over your head, and attack your scalp with a bar of soap, hoping it won't dissolve before your hair does. The soap leaves your hair stiff, slightly greasy, and smelling of sheep. There's a reason everyone wears hats. As for clothes, cleaning them is a day-long event. You soak everything in a tub with a scoop of lye, then attack the fabric with a washboard and all the pent-up rage you've been saving since childhood. Socks and undergarments get the worst of it. They're boiled, wrung, and hung out to dry, where they absorb a new, slightly fresher version of the city's ambient scent. For tough stains, some people use a secret weapon. Urine. Yes, really. It's cheap, abundant, and surprisingly effective at whitening linen. Try not to think about it next time you compliment someone's shirt. Even after your heroic efforts, true cleanliness remains just out of reach. The best you can hope for is less dirty than yesterday. You towel off with something that feels like sandpaper, dress in clothes that are merely damp, and congratulate yourself on surviving the Victorian spa experience. And yet, personal hygiene is a mark of status. The rich flaunt their access to hot baths and imported French soap. The rest make do, trading recipes for homemade lye, or comparing tips on removing the scent of onions from their hands. Bathhouses exist, but their reputation is iffy. Sometimes dens of luxury, sometimes scenes of mild debauchery. Always a place to catch the latest gossip and possibly a new rash. You finally crawl into bed, exhausted and lightly marinated, still not sure you're truly clean. But compared to the city outside, you're practically sparkling. Next, let's see how the upper crust blames the poor for every whiff and every puddle. It's time for a deep breath and a healthy dose of moral panic. Naturally, the rich blame the poor for the smell. If only they'd wash more. Say people who haven't done their own laundry in decades. You listen in on a lecture about cleanliness while quietly leaking sewage through your boots. It's a time-honored tradition in Victorian London. Whenever something is rotten, blame someone with fewer windows. The city's newspapers are filled with earnest essays on the morality of hygiene, often written from the safety of a drawing room lined with perfumed roses and doors that actually close. Social reformers, doctors, and lady philanthropists wring their hands over the wretched habits of the lower classes, as if poverty itself is a contagious odor. You attend a town meeting where a stern gentleman with an alarming mustache lectures a crowd on the dangers of filth. He wields a pointer like a saber, gesturing at maps of the city shaded by income and, conveniently, by stench. The poor are the architects of their own misery, he declares. The audience murmurs in agreement, waving lace handkerchiefs under their noses. No one mentions that his estate sits upwind of the nearest slum. At home, pamphlets circulate with handy advice. Encourage the lower orders to bathe, inspect servants' quarters regularly, and forbid outdoor laundry on Sundays as it offends the eyes of the righteous. Meanwhile, reality tells a different story. Water is scarce, soap is expensive, and washing a week's worth of clothing can take the better part of a day, assuming you even have a yard to hang it in. For the poor, cleanliness is a luxury, not a lifestyle. It's not that the working class doesn't want to be clean. It's that the city is stacked against them, literally. Families crowd together in damp cellars and attic rooms, sharing privies and water pumps with dozens of neighbours. The shared courtyards are more mud than grass, and the drains back up every time it rains. Even the most diligent housewife can only do so much against a rising tide of filth and a city that seems determined to keep its poorest residents at the bottom of the pile. Still, the narrative persists. Poor equals dirty, dirty equals diseased, and disease is a moral failing. Health inspectors prowl the alleys, noting every chipped chamber pot and stray cabbage leaf. Well-meaning ladies hand out soap with one hand and judgment with the other. If only, they sigh, the poor would embrace proper habits, the city would smell like a garden. Of course, the irony is lost on most critics. The wealthiest Londoners enjoy indoor plumbing, paid laundresses, and holidays in the country, then return to complain about the miasma wafting from the East End. Public health campaigns focus on lectures, not infrastructure. When cholera strikes, it's blamed on impropriety and moral decay. The idea that the city's problems might require collective solutions, a new sewer, more pumps, affordable soap, is quietly set aside. But the true moral panic runs deeper. The fear isn't just of smell, but of contagion, that the boundaries between classes might dissolve, that filth might travel, that suffering might cross street, James's Park, and demand to be noticed. So the well-to-do retreat behind closed doors, content to wave a handkerchief and call for reform, as long as it doesn't raise their taxes. In the end, the stink is democratic. It drifts through every window, seeps under every door, and ignores every social distinction. The poor might get the blame, but everyone gets the smell. Next, let's wander down the tunnels and into the shadows, where fear takes on a life of its own. The ghosts and legends of the Victorian sewers await. No disgusting sleep story is complete without a haunting. Victorian London is thick with sewer ghosts, phantom flushers, and rumours of alligators. You descend with a lantern and a healthy skepticism, but something's definitely breathing behind you. There's a certain hush in the tunnels after midnight, a silence too heavy to be blamed on rats or water alone. Toshers and night soil men tell tales by candlelight, voices low and faces half hidden in the gloom. Some claim to have seen flickering lights, ghostly lanterns bobbing down distant corridors where no man dares to tread. Others speak of icy draughts that snake along the walls and suddenly vanish, leaving a chill even your thickest coat can't fight off. The most famous story is of Old Tom, the grey man of the sewers. Legend says he was a worker who vanished after a tunnel collapse, his body never recovered. Now, whenever fog rolls in and lanterns flicker out, you might hear a heavy sigh, a distant shuffle, or a muffled clink of a shovel scraping brick. If you do, it said, leave a crust of bread and hurry on. Old Tom is hungry, and he's not picky. There are other legends, too. Phantom flushers, for example, invisible hands that open manholes or send a rush of water at the worst possible moment. Toshers joke about these pranks, but deep down, everyone remembers the sudden, inexplicable flood that nearly swept them away. It wasn't me, a worker will mutter, glancing behind. It was the flushers. Children dare each other to peek into drains at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of the sewer queen, a pale, weeping figure who haunts the deepest tunnels, forever searching for her lost ring. If you spot her, you're supposed to whisper your secrets and then run, fast. Some say she'll grant a wish if you're polite. Others say she'll drag you under if you're not. The bravest claim to have seen alligators, imported as pets and abandoned when they outgrew the parlour. These monsters are said to slither through the muck, blind and furious, snapping at anything unlucky enough to cross their path. Skeptics roll their eyes, but every year or so, something unidentifiable washes up by the docks, and the rumours start all over again. The stories aren't all scary, some are simply strange. There's the tale of the singing rat, whose high-pitched chorus echoes through the brickwork on stormy nights, or the mysterious gentleman in a top hat, spotted tipping his hat and vanishing through a grate whenever someone tries to follow. No one knows who he is or was, but his ghostly etiquette is legendary. These legends do more than pass the time. They serve as warnings, coded reminders of real dangers, sudden floods, collapses, gas pockets, and getting lost in the labyrinth. Toshers tap the walls 3 times before entering new territory, a ritual as much for luck as for communication. Night soil men hang lucky charms from their lanterns and never, ever whistle underground. Still, even hardened workers admit the tunnels can feel alive. Pipes groan, shadows move. The air seems to thicken, pressing against your skin, as if the city itself is holding its breath. Whether it's ghosts, gas, or just imagination, everyone agrees. You respect the tunnels, or you pay the price. By the time you climb out, you're glad for the fresh-ish air, even if it still smells like regret. But as you wipe your boots and walk home, you can't help but glance back, just once, in case something followed. Next, let's come back to the surface and celebrate a true miracle of modern life. The flush toilet, and how flush and forget changed everything. Suddenly, hope appears. It's the flush toilet, a miracle of engineering, and the best thing to happen to humanity since soap. You marvel at the first working toilets, watching as people line up just to flush, stare, and cheer. Long before the modern bathroom, the idea of flushing was more fantasy than function. Chamber pots were the standard, and if you were lucky, you had a backyard privy that didn't collapse during a rainstorm. Enter Sir John Harrington, a godson of Queen Elizabeth I, who invented an early prototype back in the 1590s. It was clever, but it never caught on. Perhaps because it required more water than most households saw in a week, or perhaps because Elizabeth's court was attached to the dramatic charm of a good old-fashioned stink. Fast forward to the 19th century and meet Thomas Crapper. Yes, that's his real name, who helped popularize the flush toilet for the masses. Suddenly, you're living in a world where the push of a lever sends your troubles swirling away, never to be seen again. Victorian magazines run glowing advertisements for the latest in sanitary porcelain, promising a life free from foul air and late-night trips to the alley. The city collectively loses its mind with excitement. Who wouldn't? The first time you encounter a flush toilet, it feels like magic. There's a handle, there's a satisfying whoosh, and, most miraculous of all, you don't have to carry anything anywhere. For a penny, you can use a public convenience, an experience so novel that people pay just to watch the water spin. No one really cares where it all goes, as long as it's away from here. It's the greatest disappearing act of the age, and you're an enthusiastic participant. Of course, the technology takes time to spread. At first, flush toilets are a mark of status, a glimmering white throne in a room all its own. The rich install them with much ceremony, showing them off to guests with pride, and, sometimes, a live demonstration. Middle-class families save up, while landlords argue about plumbing costs and try to pass off painted wooden boxes as the latest model. For years, most Londoners still rely on the bucket and the broom, peeking into neighbours' yards with undisguised envy. Flush toilets don't just change daily routines, they transform the entire city. Waste is now whisked into Bazalgette's new sewers, reducing disease and revolutionizing urban hygiene. The city's famous public conveniences pop up everywhere. Railway stations, parks, even the occasional theatre. A penny buys privacy, porcelain, and a moment of blissful ignorance about all that happens below. Not everyone is convinced. Traditionalists mutter about the danger of pipes, and more than a few disasters prove that early plumbing is, at best, an experiment in controlled flooding. Water mains burst, toilets overflow, and the sound of gurgling pipes becomes the new lullaby of London. But the flush toilet is here to stay. Within a generation, it goes from novelty to necessity, and no one wants to go back. Flush toilets also bring new etiquette. "No more garde l'eau," shouted from the window. No more bucket runs at dawn. Children are taught the sacred art of the handle, and even the most stubborn grandfather eventually admits that indoor plumbing is progress, not witchcraft. Housewives share tips on keeping porcelain shining. Men boast of never missing the chamber pot. A new era of cleanliness dawns, at least as long as the pipes hold. So tonight, as you visit your own spotless bathroom, thank the inventors who turned flushing from fantasy into fact. Modern life may have its problems, but out of sight, out of mind, has never felt so good. Now, let's peek into Parliament, where politicians are finally forced to notice the stink, if only to save their own noses. The smell gets so bad that Parliament has to act, if only so their own noses stop melting. You peek in as MPs debate how much human suffering is too much, before fleeing for higher ground and stronger cologne. For years, London's lawmakers were remarkably good at ignoring the city's aromatic woes. After all, when you spend your days in grand stone chambers, far from the East End, what's a little urban perfume? But the great stink of 1858 changes everything. This isn't just a whiff, It's an existential crisis. The Thames, swollen with summer heat and centuries of waste, turns the riverbank into a cauldron of pestilence. The smell is so potent it seeps through the thickest velvet curtains and climbs the walls of Westminster itself. Parliament becomes a fortress under siege. Desks are moved, windows are draped in chloride-soaked cloth, and politicians walk around clutching handkerchiefs to their faces like extras in a tragic opera. Some members take to dabbing themselves with lavender, others simply try not to breathe. Newspapers gleefully report on MPs fleeing the chamber mid-debate, while rumours swirl of ministers fainting dramatically during budget discussions. No member can speak, for a sense of doom pervades the House, one writes. It's only when the river threatens to drive the government into permanent recess that the true urgency is felt. The city's problems can no longer be dismissed as the poor's burden. Now, the stench belongs to everyone. As a result, urgent committees are formed: the Committee on Noxious Vapours, the Commission on River Improvements, the Subcommittee for the Protection of Sensitive Noses. Reports are written, studied, and immediately lost beneath stacks of older, dustier reports. Some MPs call for drastic action: dam the river, ban industrial waste. Even, on one desperate afternoon, move Parliament upstream to Oxford. Others suggest waiting for rain, or perhaps the cleansing hand of Providence. But the real hero is Sir Joseph Bazalgette, whose meticulously detailed sewer plan offers an escape from both the smell and political embarrassment. He is summoned, grilled, congratulated, and then, most importantly, given funding. The debates are heated in every sense. At one point, tempers flare over the cost of bricks. "Better to pay for bricks than for funerals," shouts one frustrated reformer. There is much grumbling about modern fads and unnecessary expense. But the alternative, suffocating in one's own offices, proves a powerful motivator. Progress, it turns out, smells a lot like desperation. Within weeks, work crews begin tearing up the city, laying down pipes and constructing pumping stations on a scale never seen before. The city buzzes with the sound of labour and the faint hope of relief. Bazalgette's grand project becomes a point of pride and a handy way for politicians to claim they care deeply about public health and their own nasal comfort. The transformation isn't instantaneous, but it is relentless. Gradually, the air becomes breathable again. Life returns to Parliament, and the government quietly pretends they were always champions of sanitation. They pose for portraits, sign commemorative bricks, and draft self-congratulatory editorials. The real credit, of course, goes to the workers in the tunnels and to the people whose collective suffering forced Parliament to finally take a whiff of reality. Today, historians look back and marvel at how close London came to becoming uninhabitable. The Great Stink, for all its misery, forced the city to modernize, and politicians to care about the world outside their perfumed chambers. With Parliament's crisis averted and noses intact, let's wander into the mysterious world of the London fog. When air and sewage became one, and breathing outdoors was a daily gamble, it's not just the water. The air itself is a weapon. London's famous fog isn't just mist, it's flavoured with coal smoke, dust, and eau de toilette, circa 1850. You squint through the gloom and hope your lungs make it to morning. Victorian London is notorious for its thick, swirling fogs, pea-soupers, as the locals call them. These aren't the gentle mists you see in cosy paintings or moody detective stories. This fog is an industrial-strength blend, where every inhale is a roll of the dice. You wake up to a world that's been erased and redrawn in shades of greyish yellow, visibility measured in feet, and daylight hours reduced to rumours. Step outside and the city seems to vanish. Street lamps burn all day, struggling to push their glow a yard past the glass. Carriages loom suddenly from the mist, horses' hooves muffled by the soupy air. Pedestrians appear and disappear like ghosts, wrapped in scarves and coughing up a lifetime of regrets. The sound of footfalls and distant bells echo strangely, warped by the thick, oily haze. The air tastes metallic, tinged with soot, and a chemical tang that settles on your tongue like a dare. The culprit? London's insatiable appetite for coal. Every hearth, every factory, every railway engine belches out smoke, day and night. The city is built on the backs of coal wagons, and the price is paid in breath. When fog rolls in, the smoke has nowhere to go. It sinks and swirls, mixing with river mist, chimney soot, and whatever is wafting up from the sewers below. It isn't just unpleasant, it's hazardous. Respiratory ailments skyrocket. Asthma, bronchitis, and a cough known as the Londoner's rasp become as common as tea. Worse still, the fog isn't just in the air. It creeps inside, under doors, through cracks in the window frame, past every attempt to shut it out. You might light candles and stuff rags in the gaps. But by evening, even your bedsheets smell faintly of smoke and defeat. Soup tastes like the river, bread comes with a hint of coal, and laundry dries stiff with the residue of last week's weather. Crime finds a friend in the fog. Pickpockets, burglars, and the infamous Jack the Ripper all find cover in the city's murk. Police lanterns cut through the haze in jagged cones, but catching a criminal in these conditions is more a matter of luck than skill. It's a city-wide game of hide and seek, except no one's really sure who's seeking. And the rules keep changing with the wind. For the upper crust, fog is a reason to complain, invest in better curtains, and throw another log on the fire. For everyone else, it's a health hazard and an occupational hazard rolled into one. Children are kept home from school, shopkeepers close early, and anyone who can flees to the countryside until the air clears. Yet, the fog is strangely iconic. Poets romanticize it, painters immortalize it. Even as lungs ache and eyes water, the city's artists embrace the gloom, painting it as a symbol of modernity, mystery, and, if you ask the right philosopher, a metaphor for progress itself. Still, you can't help but feel relief when the wind finally shifts and the sky returns to blue. Sunlight reveals just how much grime has settled on every surface. For a moment, the city is bright, clean, and full of possibility, until the next fog creeps in and London resumes its dance with the air. Now, let's turn our attention to the city's most fearless adventurers, street urchins who treat the sewers as a playground, risking it all in the hunt for treasure and trouble. Not everyone fears the sewers. For London's poorest kids, it's a playground and a source of income. You join a crew of street urchins spelunking for valuables, armed with a stick and a complete disregard for tetanus. Life above ground isn't exactly easy. If you're an orphan or a child from a desperate family, the streets are your home, and every day is a scavenger hunt. The city is loud and chaotic, and grown-ups tend to ignore you, unless they're chasing you away from their market stall or blaming you for something you absolutely, definitely did. But beneath the streets, in the labyrinth of brick and slime, you find opportunity. The sewers aren't just full of stink, they're full of stuff, and stuff can be sold. Armed with little more than bravado and a half-rotten rope, you follow your friends down a hidden ladder, feet slipping on the slime-slick rungs. The darkness is thick as pudding. You wave a lantern borrowed from a sleeping tosher, giggling at the echo as you shout down the tunnels. The bravest among you, Tommy No-Nose, leads the way. He's got a sixth sense for coins, lost rings, and half-smashed watches, and thanks to a childhood run-in with a rat, absolutely zero fear of anything living or dead. The work is simple, but dangerous. You poke through piles of refuse with a stick, hoping to find something shiny and praying it doesn't move. Mudlarking, they call it, part treasure hunt, part biology lesson. You find all sorts of things: a silver thimble, a cracked plate, a button from a soldier's coat, sometimes even a coin still recognizable as money. You stuff your pockets, ignoring the squelch, and try not to think about what's oozing down your boots. The older kids teach you the rules. Never wander off alone. Always watch out for rising water. And if the walls start to rumble, run fast. Every so often you scramble out of the tunnels just in time to avoid a surprise flush from above, or a passing crew of night soilmen who are none too pleased to find kids stealing their loot. For a lucky few, the haul is worth the risk. By night's end, you emerge blinking into the moonlight, hands grimy and faces smeared with victory. The local junk dealer squints at your finds and haggles you down to a few pennies, but it's enough for bread, maybe a hot potato, or even a sweet if you pool your takings. On rare occasions, someone stumbles onto a true prize, a ring with real stones, or a coin from the last century. That's when you celebrate, racing down the street, dreams of comfort swirling in your head until the next day's hunger brings you back to reality. But for every triumph, there's danger. Rats as big as cats, sudden floods, and pockets of foul air keep you on your toes. More than one friend disappears for hours, only to return pale, silent, and unwilling to share what they saw in the deeper tunnels. Sometimes you get sick, fever, cough, rashes that won't quit, but you recover, because that's what you do. No one has the luxury of fear. To outsiders, you're nuisances, troublemakers, or worse. But down in the sewers, you're a team, a ragtag fellowship bound by hunger, hope, and the thrill of the hunt. You know every shortcut and safe zone, every echo and shadow. You can navigate the city by its veins, the places no respectable adult would dare to go. So the next time you walk over a manhole, spare a thought for the children below, carving out a living where most won't even set foot. Now, let's ascend from the muck and consider the science of the stink. When bad air meant bad health, and the war on miasma was just getting started. Before germs, there was miasma theory, the belief that bad air causes disease. You attend a lecture on vapors, clutching a vinegar-soaked rag to your face, and wonder if the real danger isn't the stink, but the scientists themselves. Step into a Victorian classroom, where men in tweed jackets and extravagant sideburns argue earnestly about the invisible hand of disease. They call it miasma, the noxious exhalations of rot, sewage, and filth rising up to choke the city. Maps are rolled out, charts are displayed, and someone always points out the thick, soupy fog settling over the East End. "Behold," declares one professor, "the very shape of pestilence." The theory is simple and, for a while, feels almost comforting. If the city smells bad, that means it's dangerous. And if you can smell something terrible, at least you know what to avoid. Street vendors sell bunches of lavender, rosemary, and camphor for you to wave under your nose, while the more scientific-minded carry handkerchiefs soaked in vinegar or eau de cologne. Children are taught to run indoors at the first whiff of something foul. You learn to hold your breath and sprint past the worst drains, all in the name of public health. Everywhere you look, there are attempts to battle the air. Windows are flung open in every home, no matter how cold, to let the poison out. Potpourri bowls and incense sticks appear on every mantel. Hospitals are built with tall, arched windows and carefully positioned ventilators. Even graveyards aren't safe. Families pay extra for a well-drained burial plot, convinced that the wrong spot will leak grave vapors into the neighborhood. The city's obsession with fresh air leads to parks, tree-lined boulevards, and, eventually, the movement to clean up the Thames itself. But there are side effects to the theory. Since nobody's heard of bacteria yet, the focus remains stubbornly on the senses. If a neighborhood doesn't smell bad, it's declared safe, even if it's teeming with disease. Meanwhile, some of the city's worst outbreaks happen in areas with only a faint whiff of trouble. Science meet wishful thinking. It's not all superstition. Miasma theory does inspire some progress. Ventilation improves, streets are sometimes swept, and there's a growing call to move industries out of residential neighborhoods. Engineers design stink pipes to channel sewer gases high above the rooftops, giving the wind a fighting chance. Bazalgette and his fellow reformers push for more ambitious sewer projects, hoping that less smell equals less sickness. And in a backhanded way, they're right. Remove the filth, and you remove the breeding grounds for cholera and typhoid, even if you don't know why. Still, the lectures go on. You watch a doctor in a frock coat gesture dramatically at a jar of river water, daring the bravest student to take a sip. Nobody does. Debates rage about the best cure for foul airs, from vinegar compresses to placing onions under the bed. The richer you are, the more elaborate your anti-miasma arsenal. Silver-plated air filters, patent, pending window screens, and even elaborate masks filled with herbs. Somewhere, a visionary named John Snow quietly counts cases of cholera and suspects the water, not the air, is to blame. He's politely ignored. By the time the truth emerges, germs, not vapors, are the real enemy. The city is ready to celebrate. The new science brings hope, public health campaigns, and a new set of anxieties about what you can't see or smell. But for now, as the lamps burn and the air tastes like soup, you tuck your rag in your pocket and keep walking, grateful that at least you're upwind. Next, let's finally climb out of the muck and see how the city turned from infamous to innovative. The transformation of London's sewers and how they saved a metropolis on the brink. Finally, you rise from the depths. London's sewers, once the stuff of nightmares, become the arteries of modern life. You follow the transformation, step blinking into the daylight, and marvel at a world where you can drink the water and only gag a little bit. The story of London's salvation doesn't start with a hero, but with a crisis. The Great Stink of 1858 is so powerful, so universal, that it finally forces the city's leaders, politicians, engineers, and even the Queen herself to face the obvious. London can't just keep shoving its waste under the rug or into the river forever. The city is choking on its own success, its population exploding faster than the technology to keep up with it. Every day, thousands more people crowd in, bringing new dreams, new energy, and unfortunately, new things to flush. Enter Sir Joseph Bazalgette and the age of ambition. Armed with a vision grander than any royal parade, Bazalgette launches the world's most audacious public works project, the London sewer system. Teams of workers dig, brick by brick, through the heart of the city, carving out vast tunnels beneath streets and rivers. Pumping stations rise like cathedrals, each one a monument to the belief that everyone, rich or poor, deserves clean water and streets that don't double as obstacle courses. You walk along the new embankments, where families stroll without holding their noses and boats glide over water that, if not exactly inviting, no longer hisses in protest. The transformation is astonishing. Waste is swept away from the city, far downstream, and Londoners begin to trust their own plumbing for the first time. Ale remains popular, but water is no longer a gamble with every sip. Children play near the river's edge. The only monsters lurking now are carved into the stonework, not slithering through the muck. The new sewers aren't just tunnels, they're symbols. They show that collective action can solve even the most stubborn problems. They're the triumph of science over superstition, teamwork over denial, and a little engineering over a whole lot of wishful thinking. London becomes a model for cities everywhere, proving that public health is possible, even in a metropolis famous for its filth. The impact goes beyond clean water, disease rates plummet, and with them, the terror of epidemics. The air grows lighter, the city brighter. People move through their days with a new spring in their step, and a lot fewer rashes. The old jokes about Thames, stew, and Victorian perfume start to fade, replaced by pride in a cleaner, safer, and frankly more breathable city. Of course, the sewers don't solve everything. London is still a noisy, crowded, gloriously chaotic place. The system needs constant upkeep, expansion, and the occasional heroic intervention when things go sideways, and they do. Some legends never die. But the age of the Great Stink is over, and in its place stands a city that dared to build its way out of disaster. So, next time you pass a manhole cover or flush your toilet without a second thought, remember the tunnels below. They are the unsung arteries of civilization, carrying away not just waste, but centuries of worry and woe. The battle for clean water was hard fought, but it was won, and, in winning, gave every Londoner a reason to breathe easy at last. And with that, our journey through the pipes, puddles, and perseverance of Victorian London draws to a close. Time to take a deep, clean breath and reflect on what it means to survive and thrive against the odds. You think Paris sets the trends? Please. Welcome to the real catwalk, the damp tunnels under London. Here, fashion means stuffing your clothes with dried herbs, sewing pockets for chunks of camphor, and wrapping your boots in whatever animal skin you can borrow. You strut your stuff in front of a jury of rats, hoping someone will finally invent Febreze. Let's start with the basics. Practicality is everything. The Victorian sewer worker wakes before dawn, mentally preparing for a day spent in ankle-deep filth, and dresses accordingly. Layer 1. Undergarments. If you're lucky, you have a spare. If not, you hope yesterday's can go another round. Next comes the thickest pair of trousers you own, preferably waxed or oiled to repel the wet. Over that, an old wool shirt, permanently scented with eau de drain. Everything fits a little looser than you'd like, but the secret is simple. Baggy clothes are easier to peel off in a hurry. No true sewer trendsetter would dare descend without a proper outer layer. Coats are long, heavy, and often patched from the cast-offs of more respectable professions. Think retired undertaker's jacket or something rescued from a pawn shop. Oilskins and tarpaulins are all the rage, at least until the next rainstorm reveals their true limitations. Nothing says ready for action like a coat that stands up on its own in the corner, rigid from months of exposure and secrets. Accessories are where true style shines. Around the neck, a thick scarf, preferably soaked in lavender oil or camphor to mask the worst of the stench. For the truly bold, there's the fashion-forward move of pinning a nosegay to your lapel, a bundle of mint, rosemary, or, if you're short on cash, last night's wilted parsley. Gloves are a must, leather if you can afford them, but most settle for wool mitts or just wrapping their hands in strips of linen. Fashion tip. Nothing screams veteran-like hands permanently stained in ways no soap can fix. Footwear is an ever-evolving battle between comfort, protection, and the slow march of decay. Tall rubber boots are the dream. But for many, it's a patchwork of old shoes, rags, and whatever waterproofing concoction you can smear on before plunging in. You quickly learn to double up on socks and pray you don't step in anything that bubbles. The headwear of the season? A sturdy hat, wide-brimmed to deflect falling debris, but stylish enough to house a candle or small lantern. A good hat is your only defense against both surprise leaks from above and overzealous co-workers swinging shovels. Some workers sport makeshift helmets hammered from tin, others just settle for an old cap, stuffed with rags for padding and luck. For a select few, the final touch is the scent barrier. Layers of dried herbs tucked into every available pocket, collar, and cuff. The effect is something between a traveling spice rack and a desperate plea for help, but in a world without deodorant, it's as good as it gets. Sometimes, in especially foul stretches, workers go all in, smearing their upper lips with strong ointments or tucking garlic behind the ears in hopes of keeping both illness and co-workers at bay. As the day's work begins, you and your fellow sewer fashionistas trudge out together, comparing stains and commiserating over ruined boots. You strut through the muck, proud of your patchwork armor, knowing you look just a little less miserable than you smell. At least, until someone invents rubberized hazmat suits and laundry that doesn't judge you. Ready for more? Next, let's pull on the most infamous medical accessory of the age, the plague doctor mask, and see how medicine tried, and mostly failed, to outstyle death. It's 1858, and, yes, the plague doctor look is painfully out of date. Still, some old-school medics are wandering the city in bird-beaked masks stuffed with rose petals. Convinced this will save them from bad air, you suit up, try not to sneeze, and attempt to examine patients through two tiny eye holes and a mounting existential crisis. The plague doctor outfit is equal parts fashion statement and desperate plea for mercy. Start with the basics. A heavy black coat, waxed until it gleams with the shine of pure denial. Next, the infamous mask. Crafted to resemble a bird's beak, it's stuffed with everything from dried herbs and rose petals to vinegar-soaked sponges and, in a pinch, whatever smelled slightly less offensive than the Thames. The thinking is simple. If disease travels by stink, you fight stink with stronger stink. The end result? You move through the city with the quiet grace of a haunted carnival ride, making small children cry and adults cross the street. Under the coat, layers and layers of linen designed to keep the city's more aggressive germs at bay. Gloves? Always. Preferably leather, thick enough to protect your hands, but thin enough to allow you to scribble dubious prescriptions for dubious diseases. Boots are knee-high, and, if you're very lucky, lined with something waterproof. In practice, you spend most of your day praying that your feet survive the round. A typical morning starts with a consultation. You're called to the house of a wealthy family whose youngest son has developed a persistent cough and an unhealthy fascination with frogs. You arrive, mask fogging up, and announce your presence with a soft knock and a strong whiff of sage. Inside, the family stands well back, regarding you with the mix of awe and terror usually reserved for thunderstorms and tax collectors. You ask questions through the beak, hoping your voice doesn't come out too muffled. The boy is examined, dosed with a syrup of questionable origin, and declared likely to recover unless he doesn't. Next stop, a tenement where the air is thick with anxiety and boiled cabbage. Here, your mask offers more than protection. It's a barrier between you and the unfiltered realities of Victorian poverty. The patients here have less faith in your fancy attire, but you do your best, checking pulses, handing out pungent lozenges, and quietly adding another sachet of lavender to your beak for morale. You can't cure much, but you can offer advice. Open the windows, burn vinegar, and pray the wind changes. Lunch is a grim affair, eaten quickly in the alley while your mask hangs from a nail. You watch as flies buzz in curious circles, wondering what, exactly, you're supposed to be. Sometimes, other doctors gather for a quick consultation, comparing notes, sharing rumors of outbreaks, and boasting about who's found the rarest new rash. It's a club with only one requirement: a high tolerance for disappointment. By evening, your mask feels heavier. The city's air is no cleaner, and the number of hopeful faces grows. Still, you trudge on, certain that, with enough rose petals and vinegar, you'll live to see another day. At night, You strip off your gear, scrub your hands raw, and ponder your life choices. Medicine in Victorian London is a blend of faith, folklore, and a fantastic hat. So, if you see a beaked figure at dusk, don't be alarmed. It's probably just another doctor, doing their best with blind hope and questionable hygiene. Next up, let's trade the beak for a crown and see how Queen Victoria herself coped with the city's legendary stench, royal dignity and all. What about the royals? Turns out even Queen Victoria can't outmanner the great stink. You attend a royal banquet where windows are stuffed with lime-soaked curtains and footmen wave vinegar-soaked handkerchiefs like surrender flags. The Queen tries to sip tea with dignity, as the entire palace pretends the air isn't actively attacking them. It's a truth rarely whispered in the halls of Buckingham Palace. Even a crown is no defence against the Thames on a hot July afternoon. In the summer of 1858, the city's finest gather for a state dinner. Lords and ladies draped in jewels, diplomats fresh from the continent, and the Queen herself perched at the head of the table. The silver gleams, the candles flicker, and, lurking just beyond the velvet curtains, the city's aroma stages a coup. Preparations are frantic. Servants rush through the halls armed with all the era's defensive technologies. Vinegar misters, charcoal burners, and yards of linen soaked in everything from camphor to eau de cologne. The palace windows are sealed as tight as secrets. The drapes, now more sponge than fabric, hang limp and heavy, infused with the sense of optimism and despair. Down in the kitchens, cooks mutter about the wisdom of serving fish, and extra helpings of mint sauce are deployed as the first line of defense. But even the best-laid plans falter. As the doors open and guests file in, the stench proves both persistent and democratic. Conversations are polite, if slightly nasal. A duchess dabs her nose and murmurs about the lively air. An ambassador wonders aloud if this is the famous English weather. The orchestra plays on, valiantly masking their gags with fortissimo flourishes. You catch the Queen glancing down the table, her expression regal but undeniably weary. Dinner proceeds with all the ceremony tradition demands. Courses arrive in rapid succession. Turtle soup, roast beef, delicate puddings, each dish struggling to assert itself over the atmosphere. The wine flows, not so much for pleasure as for medicinal relief. Toasts are made, and someone proposes a cheer for the enduring spirit of London. You raise your glass, grateful for the bouquet of the vintage overpowering, even for a moment, the bouquet of the city. Midway through, an enterprising footman fans the room with a perfumed banner. It helps for a minute, until a gust from the river delivers a fresh offensive. The Queen, never one to let a crisis go unpunished, makes a dry observation about the robustness of British Constitution. Laughter ripples through the hall, and for a brief moment the mood lifts. Even the smell, it seems, is no match for royal understatement. After dessert, the palace clears out quickly, guests lingering just long enough to perform the minimum requirements of etiquette before making for carriages and cleaner air. Staff set to work, airing out rugs and discreetly burning anything that can't be salvaged. You find yourself in the garden, breathing in deeply, only to discover the roses have thrown in the towel. Behind closed doors, the Queen is said to have ordered Parliament to do something about the river. It's a rare moment of royal intervention that echoes through the city, pushing even the slowest bureaucrats toward action. The Great Stink doesn't care about titles or tiaras, but it does unite a city in the pursuit of fresh air. So, next time you light a candle or crack a window, remember, even at the top, you can't escape what's brewing below. Next, let's peek into the city's lost and found, the sewer itself, and see what bizarre objects have made their last stop underground. What's the strangest thing you could fish out of a Victorian sewer? The list is impressive. Wigs, dentures, silver spoons, entire barrels, a love letter from someone named Reginald, and, somehow, a goat. You join the lost and found department and discover that, in London, everything eventually floats downstream, especially your self-respect. Every tunnel tells a story, and most begin with something that was never meant to end up underground. Night after night, toshers and sewer workers sort through piles of muck, poking at the city's subconscious with a stick. Sometimes, it's just routine. Clumps of hair, muddy handkerchiefs, the odd broken shoe. Other times, it's a full-blown mystery. How, you wonder, did someone lose an entire family portrait? Who dropped a silver teapot, and did they notice before or after the flood carried it off? Jewelry is surprisingly common. A lost earring here, a pocket watch there. If you're lucky, you find a ring that might fetch a month's wages at the pawn shop. Toshers learn to tell stories by the objects they find. A pair of spectacles, bent but intact, might have slipped from a bridge. A child's wooden toy, faded but recognizable. Whispers of tears and a long walk home. The sewers are less a graveyard than a time capsule, preserving the flotsam of daily life. Then there are the oddities that make even the most seasoned scavenger pause. Whole barrels, still banded tight, tumble along the current like lost ships. Bicycles appear long before they're common above ground, evidence of an ambitious thief or a disastrous shortcut. Wigs are everywhere, fashion's casualty, or perhaps a secret identity shed in haste. And the dentures? Let's just say you're never too surprised to see a grin in the gloom, even when it isn't attached to a face. Documents and love letters turn up with regularity, the ink blurred and stories unfinished. One night you discover a stack of soggy invitations to a ball, never delivered. Another time, a bundle of bills, hastily thrown away by someone hoping the river could erase their debts. The most heart-wrenching find is a letter addressed to dearest Reginald, the words "forgive me" just barely legible. The story behind it? Lost forever, except to the rats. And then there are the animals. Cats and dogs, certainly, but also chickens, ducks, the occasional snake, and, in one legendary case, a full-grown goat. No one is sure how it got there, or how it survived for as long as it did. Toshers still tell tales of the sewer goat, whose stubbornness is matched only by its smell. For every treasure, there's a fair share of the grotesque. Body parts, bones, and mysterious lumps best left unidentified occasionally float by, sending even the bravest workers scrambling for higher ground. Police sometimes descend to search for evidence, usually with more questions than answers. But what unites all these lost things is the way they blur the line between accident and intention. Did someone drop their best hat, or toss it away on purpose after a rough night? Was the silver spoon lost or liberated? The sewer keeps its secrets, accepting everything with the same slow patience. By the end of your shift, you've seen half a city's worth of history pass by, all of it washed in shades of brown. You climb out, pockets a little heavier, nose permanently offended, and mind alive with other people's stories. Above ground, London bustles on, unaware that its dreams, mistakes, and midnight dramas are all just one flush away from legend. Next, let's take a breath and descend once more. This time with a group of society thrill-seekers, eager for a taste of danger. Welcome to sewer tourism, the strangest day trip of the Victorian age. Believe it or not, by the end of the century, guided sewer tours become all the rage. The rich pay for a chance to descend into the urban underworld, armed with lanterns and misplaced optimism. You tag along with a group of society ladies as they squeal over stalactites of lard and compare the experience to Paris, as if France could ever dream this big. It all begins with an invitation. A delicate card embossed with gold, promising a unique excursion beneath the metropolis. Naturally, you assume it's a joke, but here you are, standing beside a respectable clergyman, a poet, and two heiresses whose parents clearly forgot to say no. The sewer entrance is flanked by city officials eager to show off London's latest engineering marvel, and a nervous worker who looks like he'd rather face the cholera than another round of tourists. The descent is ceremonial. Each guest is handed a lantern, a handkerchief soaked in cologne, and, for the squeamish, a shot of something medicinal. The group files down a spiral staircase, the air growing colder and damper with every step. The faint light reveals glistening brickwork, ancient stains, and the slow, relentless drip of water somewhere in the shadows. A guide points out the highlights. Notice, if you will, the original Victorian arch, and, over there, a rare example of industrial residue. Please do not touch the walls. At first, the guests are enchanted. The poet waxes lyrical about the subterranean rivers of progress. The clergyman mutters a prayer. One heiress sketches the scene, carefully avoiding the puddles, but enthusiasm quickly wilts in the humidity. Skirts trail through puddles of unknown depth. Top hats are battered by low ceilings. Everyone's hair frizzes in sympathy with the ancient mold clinging to every surface. The real adventure begins when the party reaches the main tunnel. The echo amplifies every giggle, cough, and shriek as something with too many legs scurries across the path. The guide attempts to maintain dignity, explaining the role of the intercepting sewers, but is interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a distant splash. Was that a rat? Asks one lady. Or an eel? Wonders another. The consensus is to move briskly along. Inevitably, there are mishaps. A shoe is lost to the depths, never to be seen again. A young man attempts to impress his companions by wading into a side passage, only to return. Socks ruined, boots oozing, dignity permanently compromised. The group poses for a photograph, flash powder momentarily illuminating every cobweb and water stain, then debates whether the experience is more picturesque or purely educational. By the end of the tour, everyone is united by a new respect for the city's underbelly and for the workers who call it home. The ascent back to daylight is slow and relieved. Faces emerge, pink-cheeked and slightly less smug. The poet is silent, the clergyman grateful for fresh air. The heiress is busy inventing stories about what they survived. Back above ground, the experience becomes the talk of the season. Letters are written, poems published, and social diaries filled with brave retellings. Some even claim to have spotted ghosts or secret passages, determined to make their day in the dark sound as dramatic as possible. In the end, sewer tourism is less about what you see and more about what you remember. The thrill of danger, the stench of history, the sense that you've glimpsed something both forbidden and essential. For a brief moment, the divide between rich and poor, above ground and below, is bridged by shared discomfort and a healthy sense of awe. Next time you complain about the smell of the subway, remember, there was a time when people paid for the privilege of the stink, and some, incredibly, went back for more. So tonight, as you settle back into your clean, quiet bedroom, maybe with a cup of tea that doesn't taste faintly of river mystery, spare a grateful thought for the generations who braved the sewers so you wouldn't have to. The Victorians, with their clanging buckets, exploding manholes, and heroic disregard for personal boundaries, waded through a world that modern noses can barely comprehend. They built cities on swamps and powered through the great stink with little more than stubbornness, thick boots, and a complete denial of the germ theory of disease. Because for all its horror, all its stench, and all those late-night trips to the chamber pot, the Victorian sewer saga is really just a story of people muddling through. They endured cholera outbreaks, methane explosions, and the daily existential threat of accidentally swallowing river water. And somehow, they kept building, cleaning, and arguing over whose fault it all was. Sometimes, history's greatest advances come not from genius, but from desperation. A whole city saying, "No, seriously, we can't take this anymore." So tonight, be grateful for the wonders of indoor plumbing, hot showers, and water that only tastes like water. Whisper a thank you to the engineers who dreamed of a world where you don't have to wade through soup to get to work. Honor those nameless night soil men, sewer hunters, and unlucky parliamentarians whose suffering paved the way for every flush you'll ever take for granted. Because history isn't just about the grand and the glorious. It's about the quietly heroic, the occasionally absurd, and the flat-out disgusting. And if nothing else, it's proof that people will go to truly ridiculous lengths to avoid a bad smell. Rest easy, friends. The only thing under your bed tonight is dust bunnies, not a sewer rat with a story to tell. Good night.